Hello you, it's the bloke from Momo Tempo here. How you doing? I'm in my studio and I wanted to have a little chat with you on the occasion of a birthday I've just had with an inexplicable big round number attached to it. And it's okay, I mean, given that we're all getting used to nothing making sense anymore, I'm okay. But it means that a favourite project of mine, a significant project of mine, is also having a birthday, and it's this. The golden age of exploration. It's the first Momo Tempo LP. And I just wanted to take a moment to have a chat with you about it. Because the big fat round number for me and for it is just a time to reflect, I think. Because I'm suddenly officially right in the middle of my life. I've just turned 50. And honestly, I feel like I've only just sort of warmed up. Now, maybe that's something that old people say, but I don't think I'm old yet. So I instead thought you might find it interesting just to hear a little bit about the inception of this album, as a way to maybe pique your interest as well, to go find it if you've not discovered it yet, and share a bit about the artistic journey of it, I suppose, and what I learnt from it. Because this record was like a coming out for me, aged 40. And I really didn't know whether I was a complete turkey doing it. Because I'd felt the call of music from, well, late in life really, as a late teenager. So I was emotionally and technically starting quite a late bloomer, but had this sort of instinct to write little tunes and make sounds with just no kit. And little did I know that it would actually take me 20 years to find myself as an artist. Now don't yawn, this is, you know, if you're in the right mood, this is sort of interesting because you do have to a bit as an artist, but of course for artist read person, human being. And when I finished this, I really didn't know whether I was a giant, insert colourful expletive there, for being so foolish. And at that age, 40, imagining that I could still have a career in music. But the great thing about art is that you can be any age you damn well please to do what you like and explore and find validity. And at 40, I decided I'm okay with the word artist. I think I am an artist. It took me a long time to not feel silly about it. But as I realised that music is the thing I get out of bed most excited about, and music is what I use to make sense of my feelings and the world around me, that means I'm an artist, a music artist. The golden age helped me find my sound. Up until that point, I had really just been making glorified demos on things like that old 8-track up there. I still got, it's a museum to all my different kit in here, and I guess I'll walk you around it some other time. But I hadn't really thought about how to make a sound that would sell, and I felt that the music I was making would sort of find its own path, stand on its own merits, and artistically that's not entirely wrong. But there was a great lesson that I didn't learn from my time at college. When I was at Polytechnic, finishing my design training, so second part of my art schooling, it's really where I was taken apart and put back together creatively. And I knew at the time I was learning some fundamental creative things that would apply to music as well. But there's one lesson, it's only just struck me, I just didn't listen to or apply to music. And I had a couple of tutors that would come up to Leicester, where I was, from London. And they said to us, this was the early 90s, they said, look, if you want to learn how to design, go down to HMV, record shop kids, and look at all the ravey davey rave covers and just nick them, just copy them. And the sort of pretentious young pup in me thought, that's rubbish, it's got to have more integrity than that. And actually they were dead right. It's a very artistic principle to not just nick things, but to move yourself through the process of being someone else or doing something else. And if they'd made it into record stores and just had a cachet, they just looked appropriate and cool, you should try that on as a designer. And I didn't twig how to do that as a composer. A few years later, I was art editor of a games magazine, inexplicably, Play, and sat next to my erstwhile colleague Tom. He just turned to me one moment when, it being the late 90s, it was quite an eclectic time to listen to the radio. Some amazing things got airplay then. And Bentley's Rhythm Ace. Bentley's Going to Sort You Out. If you look it up, kids, it's quite groovy. Sort of trip-hoppy, breakbeaty, quirky thing. Came on the radio and Tom turned to me, he just swiveled in his chair and went, "Peach, could you make this?" And in my sort of cocky indignance, I said, yes, of course I could. And he just looked me squarely in the eye and said, "Well, why don't you? Why don't you make something like this? Get a bit of a hit, have some money and some recognition, and then do what you like." And Tom, if you're watching, I apologise for doing just such an unforgivably generic northern accent. I felt it added some colour to the storytelling. You were right, Tom. I should have done that. And it was only years later that I realised why the answer I gave was so non-committal. And it was because something inside me told me I couldn't do it. That if I tried to be someone else, it would sound like I was trying for something and failing. And my instinct, which was actually subconscious really, was to just try hard to be me. And the rest would follow. Now that's kind of true, but the rest didn't follow. And actually, end of my 20s, just before my 30s, I was working on a stupidly epic project that I hoped to have got into with some backing and production help, and it didn't come along, and so I got into it. That's another story. But I had a breakdown in the middle of it. Now, this isn't really a story about mental health, that's another thing to go into, but in many ways it was a sort of tectonic shift that I had to just go through. And many things were in play as triggers and symptoms of me just trying to come to terms with disappointment and the path to art not being easy. And out of that brokenness, I ended up forming Momo, because I didn't, up until that point, want to work for myself. And that sort of, I felt so stuck, which is really feeling stuck in a job was where I cracked apart a bit while doing this epic musical thing in the evening. And I decided to try and go out on my own, to put everything I was doing on one agenda, the music, the design, the freelancing, and just to re-skill myself and get out there. And Momo has now, in its funny, projecty way, been going for 18 years. And I don't know what I've learnt about business, but I have learnt a few things about art. And 8 years into it, I'd spent my 30s wrestling with my sound. What was my finished musical sound really going to be? And out of that came Momo Tempo and the sound of the golden age of exploration, which I feel 10 years later still holds up. It's a beautifully eclectic record and interesting to listen to in a time when we can no longer travel, because this is as metaphoric as literal. It's full of recordings from around the world when I travelled a bit. And using physical geographic travel for, you know, the symbolic one of my 80s where I pieced my confidence back together and grown a bit. Still fundamentally me, roots still back to my childhood, luckily enough. I wasn't completely broken, but this record was me coming out and going, oh, I've survived. And Momo helped me do it, and this was the output. And from here, I just became the bloke from Momo, and that was where I really first just grew confident with being me as an artist. And I take it for granted in a way now. I'm used to being the bloke from Momo. But when I put this in the hands of friends, they were all a bit slow to come back, because they're your mates. They're going to be slow, aren't they? But I really thought that summer of 2010, I was a giant idiot. And they didn't know how to tell me, and I had to just let them, the hope for music go and turn Momo into an agency and get a proper creative job at last and actually make some money. And one by one, they all came back and went, oh no, it is of course awesome. And then they each picked a different favourite record from the album, and I realised sort of that was going to be part of the story, that this would be eclectic to the point of almost not working, but that sort of how to piece a playlist together that shouldn't work but does because of the way you segue and juxtapose and do little funny sort of tunes in the middle to help it work. Plus that whole truth of having to turn it all up. In order for me as a personality to make sense in a musical world, it had to be a bit posterised, and getting that meant I finally got what my context and sound was in a very broad sort of way. So I owe this record such a lot. And there's one tune on it that is sort of, I would say it's the greatest first hit single I never had. I've never put it out anywhere but on the record. And one or two people love it. I've only performed it once live, inexplicably. And to me, it sort of sums up the kind of the journey of that record. It's a tune I laboured over from having had the idea for it and the first sounds laid down in my early 30s. I think I spent the whole time leading up to finishing this record trying to finish that tune. And it is very laboured in, but sort of weirdly works anyway. And it's the tune, well, it's a tune that has this little melody in it. You might know it if you're a Momo fan. Do you know that? Except of course what I've done to it there is turn it into the opening theme to a very wan, basically boring New England drama. Imagine a very slow crane shot into a very leafy street in the fall. Hey Ellen, are you coming to the club tonight? Oh, I don't know. Since John died, I guess I'm just looking for redemption and a fresh start. You know what I'm saying. And that's not at all what this tune is like. But then, of course, there's the other bit of the tune that effectively does this. And you know, that as a chord sequence is horribly appropriated go-to for every composer who's ever lived, who's been asked to score something in the desert. But it is still evocative, and there's something about that starts to speak in its own way of something a bit deeper and a bit more rooted. And I sense that, you know, within the song, that there is between the sort of the, you know, the naive little bit of and that middle eight, I can hear the journey between me, the younger me musically, and the me that's trying to go somewhere else and grow up. And of course I wrestled and wrestled with all the sounds in there for a long time before I felt it kind of worked. And it is a very laboured piece, but it does work. I'm not singing about anywhere specific, and of course Asylum Seeker is nodding to an idea of something happening, you know, connected to countries in the Middle East. When we think refugee now, we think Syria, but many others over there, so much war. And I'd just come off a film. The first time I'd gone to the Middle East was the year 2000, a couple of trips to help make a film in Israel, where we met some young Arab Israeli citizens who lived in Galilee, and it just blew my mind a bit. And I also got to play for the first time a little bit in very naive versions of Oriental music and get inside it and try it on. And it was nearly the first Momo record, the sound to this film called Beyond the Storm. And I felt that was made in my early 30s, and I felt like I was starting to get somewhere in my sound. And soon after that, I wrote the beginning of Asylum Seeker. And that's why you've got these sort of big boofy beats going on here. Where is it? I mean, listen to it. Where is it? Yeah, can you hear those sort of oriental beats there? Stripping it back from the original. Gosh, I think I recorded these bits, or sampled them, 18 years ago. Dig that Durbeck, man. Anyway, you get the point. I'd sort of come from this sense of rebirth, I suppose, in the Middle East, learning about stories much more ancient than me and other people, really dealing with feeling lost, but actually feeling very rooted in their different types of suffering. And it all just went into the mix of me, and that tune sort of straddles something younger and naive in me in that da-da-da-da-da-da tune. And then there's something a bit more ancient trying to happen in the middle of all the pop. So, you know, it's kind of a sweet thing to hear again. Now, all these years later, 10 years after the golden age of exploration, I'm firmly the bloke from Momo Tempo, very grateful to be, even though, you know, it's still not turned into something that will quite pay off my mortgage. Yet, as an artist, I now feel like I've sort of found a place to do things. And of course, it's grown since then. All the music I've done since then, with the confidence of knowing myself a bit more after 20 years of getting there. So I guess I'm saying it's okay to take your time. Of course it is. You're you. And I wish I'd been able to learn things much sooner and just learn how to style things quicker so that I could sell them. But my own creative journey might be, you know, I might have gone the long way round, but that's richer in journeying terms, and I think it shows in the music in its goofy way. I think the sound of Momo Tempo sounds like I've been a long way around the world as an artist in some ways. And I'm still really proud of this record, and I would urge you to go hear it again. You can, of course, get it on all the platforms online, but I have physical copies of this, so if you want to go to the merch page on momotempo.co.uk, you can buy a physical CD souvenir copy, and I'll post you one with a little note, and that'd be lovely if you rediscovered this. And to celebrate, I've done a little kind of bootleg remix of Asylum Seeker to finally put it up on SoundCloud. It's more of a kind of rough kit bash of a much loved old thing. In the end, I couldn't sort of massively reinvent it, but what I found is it's a tune that still has a weird sort of energy about it. There's still something in it that resonates, even though it's sort of naive and it's not made commercially at all the beats are just doing their own thing, but there's something in it, there's an energy that might be nice to revisit, and so you might enjoy the new Decades Defiance mix that's going up on SoundCloud with this. So yeah, 10 years of the golden age of exploration, 50 years of Timo Peach, and I feel like I'm just warming up. And but I'm grateful to the milestones. That's why it's important to finish things you can put in your hand and look back, reflect upon, and that really helps you move forward. It always has me. So bless you, golden age of exploration. You really helped me come out, and I love you. And I hope you maybe reappreciate it now. Thanks. And hey, happy birthday. Me. Cheers.